All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer. I'm putting on my senior foreign policy analyst hat for this one, because we need to talk about a situation that is literally keeping military planners awake at night. We're looking at a small island off the coast of China, roughly the size of the Netherlands, that could quite literally trigger the most catastrophic conflict in human history. It doesn't have nuclear weapons, and it only has a population of about 23 million. Yet Taiwan is easily the single most dangerous flashpoint on the planet today. So let's dive into this and unpack exactly why a conflict here would make World War II look like a regional skirmish. Here is our roadmap for today's briefing. We're going to cover the geopolitical stakes, the historical roots of the conflict, the famous porcupine strategy, actual war scenarios, and finally, we'll evaluate America's strategic options. Section 1, the biggest geopolitical flashpoint. When you break down the global market, you'll find that Taiwan produces roughly 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductor chips. We're talking about microscopic tech, literally smaller than a human chromosome, manufactured almost entirely by one single company, TSMC. These are the chips powering your smartphone, your computer, the car in your driveway, advanced AI, and even cutting-edge military weapons systems. Analysts call this massive concentration of production the silicon shield. The thinking goes that this dominance actually protects Taiwan because any aggressor knows that destroying this industry would absolutely tank their own tech sector, not to mention the entire global economy. So what does this actually mean for us? Well, if Taiwan gets cut off from the global economy, whether by war or a blockade, we are looking at a catastrophic collapse of global technology supply chains. Remember the chip shortages that completely crippled the automotive industry during the pandemic? Yeah, that was caused by a disruption of just a tiny single-digit drop in global supply. A complete cutoff of Taiwanese chip production would be orders of magnitude worse. The entire modern world would, practically speaking, grind to a halt. Section 2, Roots of the 1949 Conflict. To really grasp how we got here and to understand both Beijing and Taipei's perspectives, we have to rewind the clock. The story kicks off in 1927, when China gets pulled into a brutal civil war between the Nationalist Party, led by Chiang Kai-shek, and the Chinese Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong. They hit pause briefly to fight the Japanese during World War II, but by 1945, they're right back at it. Fast forward to 1949, the Communists win the mainland, and Mao proclaims the founding of the People's Republic of China. Facing total collapse, Chiang Kai-shek packs up his government, his military, and over 1 million people, and flee across 160 kilometers of ocean strait to Taiwan. Taipei claimed they were the legitimate government of all of China, while Beijing saw, and still firmly sees, Taiwan simply as a renegade province. To Beijing, this civil war just never officially concluded. And that brings us to today. Under President Xi Jinping, Beijing's stance has hardened significantly. As his recent public statements illustrate, Beijing's patience is running out. He has explicitly refused to rule out the use of force to achieve reunification, and they are definitely backing up those words. China's currently executing a massive military buildup, regularly flying dozens of jets into Taiwan's air defense identification zone, and running these huge military drills that literally simulate attacking and blockading the island. Section 3, Effectiveness of the Porcupine Strategy. Look, Taiwan knows they cannot win a traditional head-to-head war against China. It's just not going to happen. So they rely on something military strategists call the porcupine strategy. It is exactly what it sounds like. You don't try to wrestle a much bigger predator, you just make yourself incredibly painful to swallow. By using asymmetric warfare, Taiwan's goal is to make any invasion so incredibly costly in terms of blood, treasure, and military assets that Beijing looks at the math and decides the invasion simply isn't worth the trouble. The massive financial gap between the two perfectly illustrates why this strategy is their only real option. In 2023, China's defense budget was estimated at over $220 billion. Taiwan's? Roughly $19 billion. China has built the world's largest navy by ship count and developed hypersonic missiles. Taiwan is spending less than 1/10 of what China spends. You absolutely cannot go ship for ship or plane for plane when the disparity is that huge. So what exactly are the quills on this porcupine? Taiwan has poured money into specific, highly effective weapon systems, many of them supplied by the United States. We're talking about mobile anti-ship missiles hidden up in the mountains, thousands of naval mines ready to be dropped into the strait, mobile artillery, shoulder-fired anti-air defenses, and advanced Patriot missile systems. You have to remember, invading an island requires an amphibious assault across 160 kilometers of open water, landing on a heavily defended mountainous coastline. It is arguably the most complex and dangerous military operation imaginable, and these weapons are specifically designed to turn the Taiwan Strait into a graveyard for an invading fleet. Section 4. War Scenarios and Consequences. In 2023, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, ran a series of highly detailed war games simulating a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. The results are honestly incredibly sobering. In most scenarios, Taiwan actually does survive, but the cost is staggering. The United States loses 2 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, hundreds of aircraft, and thousands of personnel. China's navy gets largely destroyed, its invasion force decimated, and Taiwan itself is left with its infrastructure completely devastated. So even in a scenario that counts as a victory, all parties suffer catastrophic generational losses. But there is a terrifying caveat buried in those simulations. Taiwan only survives if the United States jumps in immediately and decisively. If Washington hesitates for even a few days to figure out a plan, the balance shifts completely. To prevent a takeover, the US literally has to start sinking Chinese ships before a single soldier even sets foot on Taiwanese soil. Practically speaking, this means the United States has to fire the first effective shots of a hot war against a nuclear-armed superpower.
And the fallout extends way beyond the battlefield. Let's zoom out to the macroeconomic picture. The destruction of Taiwan's semiconductor industry would wipe trillions of dollars from the global economy overnight. The Taiwan Strait, which is one of the busiest shipping lanes on the planet, would be completely closed, crippling Pacific trade. Financial markets would experience a historic crash, supply chains would implode, and inflation would skyrocket. Plus, the inevitable Western sanctions against China would effectively cleave the entire global economy into 2 competing, hostile blocs. We are talking about a full-on, generation-defining economic depression.
Section 5. Evaluating American strategic options. For decades now, the absolute cornerstone of American strategy here has been a concept known as strategic ambiguity. Under the 1979 Taiwan Relations Act, the US provides Taiwan with defensive arms, but keeps it officially, purposefully vague about whether American troops would actually show up to fight to defend the island. It's a very delicate balancing act. It keeps China guessing, which deters an invasion, and it keeps Taiwan guessing, which stops them from formally declaring independence, which would instantly trigger a war. But with China's rapid military modernization, a lot of analysts are starting to ask if this ambiguity is really enough to maintain the status quo anymore. When you actually evaluate the options sitting on the table for Washington, it becomes pretty clear that there are no good choices here, only least bad ones. Option 1, fight for Taiwan. Obviously, this risks escalation to a nuclear war, massive casualties, and global economic ruin. Option 2, abandon Taiwan. If the US just steps aside, it signals to key allies like Japan and South Korea that American security guarantees are worthless. Those countries might rush to build their own nuclear weapons, and the US-led international order would effectively collapse. Option 3, maintain the status quo. This relies entirely on the hope that deterrence holds. But as the military balance shifts and time ticks away on Xi Jinping's timeline for reunification, this option is getting less viable every single day. Which leaves us with this final, truly profound question. Ultimately, the Taiwan crisis is about so much more than an island of 23 million people. It is a massive stress test of the global system. If territorial conquest works here, it flashes a bright green light to authoritarian regimes everywhere. But if the international community stands firm, it risks unimaginable devastation just to defend the principle of sovereignty. So will our century be governed by a rules-based order, or simply by the law of the jungle, where might makes right? It's easily the most consequential geopolitical question of our time, and the world is running out of time to find an answer. Thank you so much for joining me for this strategic briefing. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.